What's going on, guys? So just to give you a little bit of a weather report, it was about 70 degrees all week, give or take, 70, 65. Water temps got up to like 64-ish, mid 60s. And then, of course, the weekend rolls around when I finally get a chance to fish, and the weather drops off. And I think it was this morning when I woke up, it was 31 degrees, which is a huge difference from what it has been. And I know that on the last video I talked about how cold fronts in the springtime, especially after a warming trend, can be really good. I really want to be on the front side of that front. I want to be fishing when that front actually hits, not the day after it hits. So definitely is not a, I'm a little late on it, but there's nothing I can do about that. The front hit last night and it got real cold and it stayed cold all night. I would rather it have hit this morning. I think I would have had just a killer morning, but it's all right. I've caught a few fish. I've started to slowly get things figured out here. I started shallow, started fishing old pad fields, and just started slow rolling the chatterbait through some of the pad stems. And I did okay that way. I eventually started to move to a little bit deeper water. I'm back in a ditch right now, thinking that maybe if these fish really didn't like that cold weather, they may have pulled back just a scratch into deeper water. But I didn't actually. Oh my, jeez! Holy smokes, people! Hold on here. I just got popped my jig out of a tree and just got clobbered. What a dummy! Gosh darn it! I popped my jig out of a laydown, and I just got absolutely T-boned. And yeah, I wasn't prepared for it at all. I was trying to think about what I was going to say to you guys next, and next thing you know, whammo, which would be, there he is. Not a real big fish, but it's a sign. Starting to get things figured out now. I thought they would really want to eat a moving bait today, but it just really hasn't been the case at all. I caught a couple on a chatterbait, but not as many as I thought. I really kind of had in my mind coming into the day, I thought that was going to be the ticket, but it's looking like it might be another jig day, which you're never going to hear me complain about catching on a jig. I love catching on a jig. Alright guys, so what I'm looking for this time of year, especially when you're in that early spring, is I want to be near deep water. I want to have that deep water access available for fish, because like I talked about in that last episode, these fish, as these water temps start to climb, and like I said, Tuesday to Wednesday, the water temps were probably about 62 to 65. Now, granted, that's a surface temperature reading. It was probably not all that warm, just a little bit deeper, but it was relatively warm, and those fish were on the move up. Now, with this front that hit last night, it's kind of made things a little trickier. Guys, something that's really, really, really important this time of year is the way that you present the bait to the fish. And to be more specific, you really need to practice your casting in a way that allows you to put that bait in the water softly. Like, you don't want to do the overarching cast where it bombs and hits the water, because in the springtime, as these fish start to transition themselves into a little bit shallower water, a lot of times, they could be in 6, 8, 10 inches of water. Some of your smaller fish, and for a 5-pounder, all he needs is a foot. I mean, a 5-pounder will sit in a foot of water just fine. Most people don't think about it that way, but they really will. So if you plop your bait around, there's a good chance that if you land it next to that fish, you could potentially spook him out of there. Versus if you put it in there real softly, sometimes he actually, will read that as something for him to eat, whether it be a crayfish or a fish. I mean, you got to think about it in a fish's perspective. A fish doesn't eat things that fall out of the sky. Fish eat things that are in the water already, with the exception of maybe a frog or a bird or something, but those are very, very rare occasions. For the most part, he's eating fish, he's eating crawdads, he's eating stuff that's coming up off the bottom. So to have something just plop on his head, a lot of times you'll run that fish out, and he's, for more than any reason, he's just spooked, and you'll spook that fish out and you won't catch him, versus if you would have presented that bait softly and put it right in front of his face or off to the side of him, he doesn't hear that big splash, then he can, in his mind, will register it as something potentially for him to eat. All right, guys, I think I'm starting to get things somewhat figured out. So what I've been doing to approach this ditch is a combination of a moving bait and a jig. It seems like there's not a ton of stuff in this ditch as far as, like, you know, cover and structure wise goes. Like, there's just isolated little stumps of like buckbrush. It's not, they weren't like big trees by any means. They're just little clumps of buckbrush, and there's not a bunch of them, but the ones that are there, you can definitely catch a fish on if you approach it properly and you kind of take your time on it. So what I've been doing is, when there's a section of bank that doesn't have much to it, I'm just kind of casting rapid fire style, a moving bait, spinner bait and chatter bait or whatever, just trying to see if I can pick up one that's kind of in transit. And then when I hit these clumps of buckbrush, I slow down and pick up a jig and really kind of work it thoroughly. I don't like throwing chatter baits and stuff near these stick-ups, because it just seems like them chatter baits can find literally about any piece of wood in the water they'll find. And I don't want to snag up on something I think can hold a fish. So, fish should come back. The only problem with where I'm at right now is this ditch kind of narrowed up on me a little bit, and you can't hardly move the trolling motor without making a total bunch of racket. So I've been trying to make a little bit longer cast. There he is. Been trying to make a little longer casts because these fish, especially when they get up shallow, they can be a little spooky. They're not too bad right now. Like, that fish come back and eat it, so that tells me he's hungry. So let's see if we can catch a big one now. I don't know what the scoop is with that. They're all good fish, 2-pounders, which is a fish I love to catch. Good hard fighting fish. They're all healthy looking. But I want Big Mama. Oh, that might be her. That might be her. Oh, sheesh. Oh, how about that? Huh? I was just saying, where are the big fish at? That's a good fish. Probably about a 3.5-pounder. Same thing. Same jig combination I was using in the previous video. Green pumpkin with a little bit of orange in it. The water's got a little bit of stain. Not bad considering how muddy it's been. But this is a great fish. I think there's a lot more down this ditch, guys, so let's see what we can come up with. Jig-wise, brand, I'm using an Omega jig, I think. I'm not really sure. I stole it from a buddy of mine. He left it in my boat. Shout out to him for leaving it, because it's a really good jig. But jig-wise, man, it really doesn't matter. Just get one off the beaver hut. Not a big fish, but a lot of fun to catch. Just glad I'm catching something in the weather that we got. Pretty fortunate. But on a jig, all you look for, I don't really push any brands. I just want a good solid wire hook. And just keep in mind, the thicker you get that hook, the heavier setup you have to bury that hook. So like on this specific one, I'd say it's probably a 4/0 or so, maybe a 5/0. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to look at the packaging, but it's got a really thick wire hook, so I'm fishing a 7'3". I like a little longer rod than a 7-foot. I don't fish a whole lot of 7-foot rods, just because I'm not a tall guy, but I got just enough length that a little bit of a 7'3" gives me a lot more leverage and a lot more line take up when I go to take a swing. About to catch me another one here. great opportunity to get people outside and outdoors, because even if they're not interested in fishing, they can still look out and look at birds, look at geese, and there's just a lot going on in the outdoors, and I think that's what, more than anything, what it's about for me. Oh my! Oh, holy cow! Right in the crotch of a tree. Then I cast it out, and I was looking back at you guys, and I looked back at my line, and my line's about 6 foot away from where I casted, so that's a pretty easy way to tell you got a fish on. Gosh, there's another one at the same tree. Not big fish, but still something. But again, guys, this is just one of my favorite times to be outside. You can probably hear them geese. I mean, it's just, gosh. Well, I was concerned that maybe this water got a little cleaner and these fish weren't in here, but I was wrong. They're in here still. Believe that. I was really, truly blessed. My dad got me into the outdoors at a very, very young age, and he taught me the do's and the don'ts and the rights and the wrongs, and I learned it firsthand, and it really, really stuck with me. And I was fortunate. There's guys out there that, and gals, I don't want to say one over the other, you know, there's people out there that didn't have a dad or a mom or a brother or a neighbor to, you know, get them outside and get them into the outdoors. And it can kind of be tricky. And if you don't have a resource to help you along the way, you know, it's real easy to get sold into different things and you know, not really having the good information at your disposal. I would never have ever been able to get into the outdoors as seriously as I was without my father. I mean, I really, the knowledge that I have and the things that I've been able to accomplish, a lot of that is directly related to my mom and my dad. They did everything to get me outside, and I'm so grateful for that. I want to make it a point to involve my, you know, my kid and my woman in the outdoors as much as I can, because I want them to experience it. There's a lot of blessings, a lot of benefits to being able to get outside and, you know, enjoy stuff like this. And if people don't have family to get into it, you need to help them on. I mean, I'm at a point now where I do whatever I can to help somebody. It doesn't matter if it's a guy in the parking lot who's going out with his kid and he's not really sure what to use. You know what? I'll give him a jig, or I'll give him a chatterbait, or I'll give him a frog if I feel like, you know, that's what they should be throwing based on the conditions, or, you know, whatever. I mean, if I'm sitting there catching fish and a guy comes along the bank with his kid, I won't hesitate for a second to tell him to come on over. I mean, I'll give him my own rod and reel to use for the day, if that's what it means. I just want to see people get involved in the outdoors, because the more of us that get along in the outdoors and get involved, the more influence that we have as a whole. And whether it's acquiring public lands or maintaining boat ramps, we've got to stick together. And if we're against each other, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you're going to see change in the future. And again, as technology has come along, you don't see as many kids going outside and playing and getting in the outdoors. So, not to get on a big soapbox, but I just really wanted to take this opportunity to help those of you at home that need help getting in the outdoors and learning things. And, you know, whether you're doing it for yourself or you're trying to maybe get your kid involved in the outdoors and your dad never taught you, whatever the case may be. Golly, I'm getting into them now. Woo! Holy cow. I'm going on a big soapbox here and I'm on them. So yeah, if you have any questions about anything, whether it's related to the video or not, always feel free to shoot me a message and I will give you my honest opinion about whatever that you ask me. And I got a pretty good thumb on about everything outdoor related. The only thing I don't do well in the outdoors is trapping. I'm not a trapper. I have no idea how to trap anything. So there's not a whole lot I can do for you on that, but everything else I got a pretty good feel for, and I want you guys to feel confident to ask me questions, and I will make it a point to answer all of them.